Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another episode of Friday Morning at the Fun House with the two recently shaven men, Martin Popoff and Pete Pardo. What's going on, Martin? How are you?
Yeah, love to see the two haircuts. Very cool. Yeah.
Yes, well, clean and looking
Yeah.
good. It's like, woohoo. Now, of
Looking
course, all the
forward to
comments will be,
talking.
Pete, when are you going to grow your hair long
Yeah,
again?
yeah.
Sorry, man.
Well, our hair should be long for this episode because it's about the 60s, right?
At the
So
60s, right? All the great
unfortunately, yeah.
guitar riffs of the 60s
Yeah.
during the days of the hippies and all that, and acid rock and whatnot. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of. It's funny because when Martin and I did the show last week about the riffs of the 70s, I had a boatload. And there are some great ones that I absolutely forgot that I felt horrible on afterwards. Aqualung, I'm talking to you. How the hell did I miss Aqualung last week? I have no idea. But and we both figured, all right, the 60s, rock music, less years, whatever, probably not as many. But man, once I started doing this exercise and going through, there's a lot of great ones in the 60s as well. So we were originally going to do 20. We're going to do 25 each. I have honorable mentions because I couldn't squeeze everything in, and I'm sure there's some I'm forgetting, but it is what it is. Martin, how's the rain by you? Oh, that's, man, like a monsoon here
Yeah,
today.
it's been on and off, very
All
humid,
week.
very hot. Yeah, it's been
Ugh.
crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, the humidity is crazy, right? It's just like it's not like it's I think it's only like 75 out this morning when I just came in, but it's just rainy and that humid, you could like slice it. It's like there's like a curtain up outside, It's just like, I've had it with this humidity. Whether it's hot or cooler, the humidity is staying here. It's just like no good. So anyway, yeah, let's get to it. So we got 25. We're gonna do five each at a time, and we're gonna blaze through these and talk a little bit about each one. And you might get us humming and singing some of these riffs as we did last week, which people seem to love, right? Nothing like two older gentlemen just singing riffs, right? Because hey, why not? May even pull out the air guitar a little bit here and there, right? Why not?
Well, I'll start right in. Beatles' birthday. That's my first one, right? I think we're gonna have a lot of overlap here, which is good because I think I kind of went for the correct answer. I went for a very sober conservative list. It mixes a little bit of the greatness of the riff, the history of the riff as part of this whole thing, and the importance of the riff in this. I looked a little bit. I took a quick look through my Who Invented Heavy Metal book, my favorite book that I've ever done, which has tons on the 60s, just to make sure I caught stuff. I did a little bit of looking on the internet, and most of it was just off the top of my head, the main one. So I think this list is very conservative. It's not going to surprise too many people. But yeah, I'm going to start with the Beatles' birthday. I like it because it's also got the so it's got a fair bit of riffing in it, right? It's 1968. I also wanted to kind of pick some things here that aren't from hard rock heavy metal bands as much. I got some complaints in the 70s one about that, because this is kind of a natural thing for this. Anyways, so next I went with so there's my big Beatles White Album box. Next I went with Kick Out the Jams. So this is really low, but I thought I'd have it super high, but I actually have it low. So from Kick Out the Jams, there's my famed three guys signed gatefold of that. So Kick Out the Jams, I actually before you asked, hey, can we do another five? We had it at 20 I didn't have this on my list because I feel like it's not particularly a riff. It's a little more chordal, right? We get into that discussion of when does a chord sequence, when are there enough chords that you're moving away from the chord sequence, like actually to start with. I mean, you sometimes have rock songs where even the chord sequence is not even very much of a sequence. It's one or two chords and everything relies on the vocal melody and stuff. So you move along that scale towards riff and you start getting more chords and more chords and more chords, and then two finger chords, and then one finger, notes. So that's kind of what a riff is. You think of what the definition of a riff. I actually looked up and saw one or two. It's didn't really mean much, but it's the idea of a short repeated guitar pattern,
Yeah.
That becomes a hook in a song, kind of thing. So Kick Out the Jams is a little bit gray area, but it's a super famous song. It literally was one of the first ones I had come to mind. So for that reason, it could have been top five, but now it's bottom five. It could have been not off the list because of this discussion. Next, I have Paint It Black, Rolling Stones. I picked this because actually I just recently did a podcast episode on locating the Rolling Stones sound. This song is a million miles away from the Rolling Stones sound. I love that it's kind of considered one of the first goth songs of all time, but it is definitely a guitar riff. It's an early guitar riff. It's an important one. It's kind of a dark, weird song. I personally don't think that Keith Richards is a riffmeister. He doesn't have tons and tons and tons of riffs. Most of what they do is pretty chordal. But Painted Black is an important one. I've got another one here as well. Or no, hang on. Did I? Yeah, I do have another one. I actually kicked off one. But yeah, Painted Black is definitely a riff. And next I'm going with Fleetwood Mac Oh Well from Then Play On. Yeah, it is. It's a complicated riff. It's a little bit in that Led Zeppelin Black Dog vein, you know. There's a lot of notes there, right? So it's a riff. And it's got some acoustic stuff as well. A pretty complicated song. So I thought that was pretty cool. I think that's 1969. And then my last one for the first five is the Kinks, All Day and All of the Night. You got to put some super history in here. I figure this is a little more notey than You Really Got Me, so it leans a little more to riff than chordal. But you know, you know, there's a fair number of notes in it, right? So, and it's a super important song for the origins of heavy metal, the origins of the power chord, as is You Really Got Me. So those are my first five.
Yeah, I think I'm looking at my list here. I think a lot of the 60s things that we classify as classic riffs are more like these successions of repeated notes as opposed to more like these kind of like power chord combinations and whatnot that we saw starting a lot more in the 70s and certainly into the 80s, right? So yeah, mine, I'm all over the place with all sorts of stuff here. So I'm going to go also to the Rolling Stones for number 25. I'm going to go with Monkey Man from 1969. I have a lot from like 1969. There's some that are earlier, but 69 was a pretty good year. I mean, Monkey Man is just cool. You know, again, you know, you talk about Keith Richards, and I mean, some people say he is a riff master, and then other people say he isn't. But I think we'll all agree that there are a lot of classic Stone songs that have those repeating guitar structures that are just very, very catchy, and that's what you remember. And Monkey Man, I always thought, you know, and it repeats throughout the song. It's very, very cool. Lots of fun. I mean, I had so many Rolling Stones picks. It's crazy from this time period. Next up, I'm going to go to 10 Years After from the album, which is right there, and it's I Woke Up This Morning. Again, it's just like a little blues lick, but it repeats throughout the song. It's so memorable, so awesome. Absolutely love it. I Woke Up This Morning. And next up, I didn't grab it, but I picked Walk in My Shadow from Free. Again, a lot of these kind of like British blues bands did these like little repeating blues licks, which essentially are also riffs, and it's really what you remember in the song. And here you got Paul Kossoff doing this incredible husky, you know, bluesy kind of heavy lick at the beginning of the song and repeats throughout the song. Awesome stuff, and that's from the very, very first album, Tons of Sobs. And then next up, number 22, I'm going to go with Day Tripper by the Beatles. There's actually a lot of cool little Beatles riffs, and there's so many to choose from. I went with Day Tripper because man, it's just so memorable. You know, it's just awesome. That's absolutely great. That's my number 22, and last one for this round. Because I completely forgot about them on last week's episode, I got to give Jethro Tull some due here, Mr. Martin Barr. I'm going to go with A New Day Yesterday from the stand-up album, and again, it's a blues pattern, right? Dum 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 dum. It's so dark and menacing, but it's basically just a little blues lick, which is done very, very well. So yeah, those are my first five.
Cool. We may have the complexion of the show might be kind of the reverse of the last show where you took care of the anchor ones, and because you're coming up with some really good deep tracks, which is really cool. All right, so yeah, more again, more predictable ones here, I suppose. But my number 20, I'm going with Jimi Hendrix, Experience Manic Depression. I feel like people talk about this as being the origins of progressive metal a little bit, right? This song, it's a little more complicated, a little more proggy. The beat's a little bit weird, but yeah,
He's
there's
great in that.
yeah the dun, 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 dun. So yeah, that's a good one. Next I'm going with Cream, Sunshine of Your Love. Where's my here? We've got the this one here that yeah, there we go. So Sunshine of Your Love. I personally, I always, say that Eric Clapton's overrated. I'm not a big Eric Clapton fan. I don't think he's that much of a riff guy. I don't think Tales of Brave Ulysses, I wouldn't count it as a riff, but this you do. It's basically the origins of your Iron Maiden or your Smoke on the Water. It just feels like the first one of those. It's a little bit Black Sabbathy, but yeah, I'd say that's a riff. Next, I'm going with Blue Cheer, Magnolia, Caboose, Baby Finger from Outside Inside. I personally think that this album has more to offer than Vincebus Vincebus Eruptum. Very widdly riff. So it's the start of that sort of thing. I mean, it's still a little bit based on bluesy things, but it is getting pretty heavy. It's a fairly complicated riff. And just to drive home the point, number 17, same album, Come and Get It from that album, which is kind of a chordal mix with the widdly stuff. So I think both of these songs are an advance over the I think the first album's a little overrated, the second album's a little underrated kind of thing, and then they get fairly mellow after that. Next I'm going with again, I feel this is a bit of a cheat. I had a hard time putting this one in, but it's fairly famous from the Stooges. I Want to Be Your Dog, which is a little straightforward and chordal, not much to it. But it does have so it's got some extra notes in there as well. But yeah, it's a little kick out the jams, I think. So that is my last of the next 5.
So I had both that and Kick Out the Jams in my longer list when I reached out to you and said, can we squeeze 5 more in? I was like, okay. And then I wound up finding 5 others, and I wound up not picking those. They're both in my honorable mentions because they're both great. You got to have them here. All right, well, where are we here? Number 20. All right, so I have Can't Explain by The Who. I mean, probably very, very influenced by the early riffy stuff from the Kinks, but Can't Explain, just such a terrific riff from Pete Townsend. I mean, he's one of the ultimate rhythm guitar players of all time, and I think he's got tons of great riffs throughout the catalog. That's my number 20. Next up, I'm going to go with number 19, Let Me Love You, Baby by the Jeff Beck Group, which again is kind of like an extended blues lick, but just so good. It's like I really wanted to find more Jeff Beck stuff, but he's never been big on real riffy stuff. There are some things that are more like note passages and whatnot, but a lot of times he doesn't repeat them. He does them quickly at the beginning. You never hear it again in the song. But Let Me Love You, Baby definitely has that. Very, very cool song off the first album there. Next up, I'm going to go with, got to have some Joe Walsh here. I'm going to go with Funk 48 off of the debut album, Your Album. So for everybody who thinks that Funk 49 is one of the great riffs of the 70s, and it is, and I forgot it last week, Funk 48, which is the song that comes first, also has a really, really cool little riff at the beginning of the song. It's kind of heavy. It's kind of funky. It's a little complicated. It's, it's very, very cool. A little bit different than Funk 49, but I think equally as successful. So I'm going to squeeze that one in here. And next up, I got one from Martin's favorite band of all time, Paranoid by Grand Funk Railroad. I mean, that's an example of a really early, doomy, dirgy riff, which is loaded with fuzz, and it bashes you over the head in the beginning of the song. Then the song gets kind of spooky and atmospheric. Then it comes back in the middle of the song again. So awesome. Absolutely love it. Paranoid by Grand Funk Railroad. I know Martin's got that on his list somewhere, right? And my last one for this round, I'm going to go with Creedence Clearwater Revival, Green River, title track to that album. John Fogerty has got a shit ton of great riffs. I have a whole bunch in my honorable mentions as well, and I figure I'm trying to give love to everybody in this list here, so I definitely wanted to fit him on. I was trying to figure out which one to do, but yeah, it's just this kind of. I mean, he's got all sorts of cool stuff. It's amazing how like Fogerty had this like kind of like gnarly guitar tone on all these classic riffs, but he was not a guy to necessarily use like a fuzz box or anything like that. He would just overdriven amp on its own and just this nasty swampy tone on all these songs. Just so good. So yeah, Green River from Creedence is my number 16.
Nice, nice. Okay, so okay, next I'm going back to this Stooges album for Not Right. Not right. You know, it's definitely a riff. It was the first one I thought of from this album. Disqualified is the next album because it's 1970, so it really can be only from this album. Next, I'm going back to the White Album for Helter Skelter. I feel like, you know, it does have the chorus basically. Perfect riff, right? Heavy, fuzzy. You kind of want fuzz on these riffs, maybe, but definitely, you know, hats off to the Beatles for that. Again, I felt like I've got a lot of repeat bands here because I'm not really spreading the love here. I'm basically thinking of the ones that again mixed with you know, the importance of pushing the riff forward, how famous they were, that kind of thing. So mine are pretty mainstreamy. Next, I'm going with Zeppelin Dazed and Confused off of the first Zeppelin album. And we know that has a previous history as well, so maybe I shouldn't be crediting it completely to Led Zeppelin. But yeah, right. So definitely a doomy, Sabbathy kind of riff.
Definitely dirgy. Yep.
Yep. And next, I'm going with the Amboy Dukes, Dr. Slingshot. Definitely a cool, Widley sort of riff from Ted, kind of Hendrixy, 1968. It would have made a good Hendrix song. But I went through that album and wasn't finding a lot riffy. Ted was not particularly riffy back then. And next, I'm going with back to this album for Communication Breakdown, which again, that's more of like the predecessor to Paranoid or Symptom of the Universe. So whether you consider that a riff or not, you know, I think in the wider mainstream world, they would call that a riff kind of thing. But yeah, it's quite simple, but it's definitely hooky, and it's just got those, you know, those sort of accent notes in it. So so there you go. That's my 15 through 11, I believe. Yeah.
All right. All right, my number 15 is we're gonna go do a little Eric Clapton here, but not from Cream yet. I'm gonna go with Had to Cry Today from Blind Faith. I agree with you, everything you said about Clapton before. I dig Clapton and the Blues Breakers, Cream and Blind Faith. I like some of the solo stuff, but you know, I've always felt he was a little bit overrated. I mean, he's fine for what he does, and I do like a lot of the early stuff. But you know, this is not really much of a riffy album at all. But that is a very cool riff lick, whatever you want to call it, to start off this record from Blind Faith, the one and only album. Number 14, I'm going to go with Jumpin' Jack Flash from the Rolling Stones. That's a great riff. That's it. To me, that's one of the greatest Keith Richards riffs of all time. It's just so catchy. It's so infectious, and it's just so memorable. Everybody knows it. Everybody loves it. Jumpin' Jack Flash. Number 13, I'm going with Born to Be Wild by Steppenwolf. I figure Steppenwolf has to be on here. They really have two songs that I think really fit this list. I'm going to pick this one because it is so important. It is so famous and whatnot. But, you know, again, it's like a precursor to a lot of metal that would come in the mid-late 60s. Pretty influential song. Number 12, I'm going to go with another kind of proto-progressive metal favorite, I think. In the 24th Century Schizoid Man from In the Court of the Crimson King by King Crimson. Robert Fripp doing, I mean, that's pretty damn heavy for the time. And what's really interesting is like some of these riffs that we're talking about here, Martin, are very doomy. Way before we had anything called Doom, right before Black Sabbath, right? So I definitely think 21st Century Schizoid Man falls into that bracket. And my last one here, I'm going to go with You Really Got Me by the Kinks, just because you have to. Maybe Van Halen made it even more famous, but the reason why Van Halen did is because it's one of the great riffs of all time. It's a classic. I don't think it's their best riff, as we'll see coming up in a little bit, but I think it's definitely an awesome one. So yeah, that's my last one for this round.
Nice. Okay, so now we're going to start to have a little overlap. But yes, I'll start with Leslie West, "Dreams of Milk and Honey" from the Leslie West Mountain album. I checked "Blood of the Sun" as well, but it's kind of verse isn't riffy on that. So yeah, that's pretty cool. Edgar Broughton Band, "Evil" from Wassa Wassa, 1969, quite Sabbathy, kind of crossed with the Stooges a little bit. Pretty cool. Yeah, thanks for that. And also on there is "Love in the Rain" and "Dawn Crept Away." So yeah, pretty cool album. Pretty extreme Captain Beefhearty sort of vocals out of that.
Yeah, I have a collection of like four of their Harvest records, and I love the music, but man, every time he sings, I'm kind of like, oh, I'm not quite sure I like that.
Yeah,
He's definitely got
exactly.
a polarizing voice for sure. But yeah,
Yeah,
there's some heavy stuff on a couple of those albums. Yeah.
yeah. Next, we're going back to the Rolling Stones. I pulled this out because it's got Jumpin' Jack Flash on it, and
There
that's
you
what
go.
that's
Yeah.
what I picked. I think it is his superlative riff. It's the closest thing where I talk about heavy metal as being this thing where it's like crowding around a hot rod car with the hood up and looking at the engine. Well, that engine could be. I also describe it as heavy. The definition of heavy metal being everybody crowding around a riff. And I feel like that is a Stone song that feels that way. The reason I said Keith Richards isn't particularly a riffmeister is that I feel like there's a lot of traditional rock and roll in what they do, but there's also two guitarists doing a weave. There's often organ or piano. There's a strong vocal melody, and there's strong drums and percussion added quite often, and you put all of that together and it's still sparse, right? Which is really kind of a weird thing about the Stones. So I just feel like there isn't a lot of hearing a really pronounced central, unified riff coming out of them, because again, it's immediately muddied even just by there being two guitarists doing different things at the
But
same time. But yeah,
when they do it, it really stands out, right? Like I think you could pick any of those early albums, and the one that kind of falls into what we're talking about here on the basis for the show, then it stands out. It's like, oh, there's a cool riff from the band. But you're right, they don't do it a lot on from album to album to album. But when they do, it's like this song, or even though it's a single, right, stands out.
yeah,
Satisfaction, which I don't think is as good as this one, I think also stands out. I picked Monkey Man before. I think Gimme
yeah,
Shelter sort of is trying to be a riff, right? I mean,
yeah.
there's other songs. I think in the like on when Mick Taylor joins the band, I think they started to do a little bit more riffy stuff, but certainly in the 60s, a little bit different. I totally agree with you there.
Yeah, and I think Bill Wyman strengthens the Jumpin' Jack Flash riff as well. I think what
Yeah.
he does
Yeah.
kind of makes you pay attention and hear it
Yep.
better too. So, okay, I got two more in this batch. Jimi Hendrix Experience, "Purple Haze." Not the verse part. I think there's no riff there whatsoever. Yeah, I've got what's my version of that? I've got hanging right here. So, there we go. I got this one here. And that's so famous for the and then even excuse me, you want to kiss it, do 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 do, that's all riff too, right?
Oh yeah.
So that's super important. It's one of the most famous songs for guitar playing, basically from the 60s. And I'm gonna end with from this batch, I'm gonna end with "Good Times, Bad Times" from this album. A lot of riffing going on in that song, right? Definitely a riff song from them. So there you go. That is my 10 through 6.
I mean, let's be real. We could have our top 10 just basically full of Hendrix and Page riffs at this point, right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
yeah. All right. Number 10 for me is going to be Sunshine of Your Love. We already talked about it. It's classic. Love it. One of the few good ones from him from this time period.
Yeah.
Number 9, I'm going to go with All Day and All the Night by the Kinks. I think that's a much better riff than You Really Got Me. They're both classic, but I don't know, man. It's just so grimy and grungy and just awesome. Dave Davies, man. Just I wish they did more songs like that back in the day. Unfortunately, those two tunes were kind of like, those were like outliers for the most part. All right, it's time to go into Led Zeppelin land here now for me. So I'm going to go with Heartbreaker from the second album. I mean, this album is chock full of great riffs. The first two albums for sure. I think I'm leaning a little bit more towards the second album for my picks here. But man, Heartbreaker's so good. I mean, it's just so ominous. So good. It's kind of like the sexy riff, right? This to me, I always heard that riff. I was like, it's Page's sexy riff, but it's awesome. That's my number 8. Number 7, I could not leave this off of this list because it's just so freaking memorable. I'm gonna go with In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida by Iron Butterfly. Absolutely awesome. Everybody knows it, and it's just haunting and heavy. And again, another band who always labeled as a really heavy band. That's probably the heaviest song in this part of the catalog, but it is so heavy. It is so great. Everybody knows it. Like I said, it's killer. It's killer. So that is my number 7. Last one for this list, for this part of the list. I'm going to double you here. Dreams of Milk and Honey, man. I'm so happy you picked that because that is absolutely killer. I mean, Leslie West has got a ton of killer riffs in the Mountain catalog. This is labeled as a Leslie West solo album called Mountain, but it's just technically a Mountain album before they became Mountain. Blood of the Sun is also terrific, but man, Dreams of Milk and Honey, so heavy. Just awesome. That one of the first ones I thought of for this list, and I knew it was going to be in my top 10. So Leslie West, King of the Riffs, my number 6.
Nice. Okay. All right. So my next one, my number 5, I'm going with Living Loving Maid from Zeppelin 2. Total riff, right? Yeah. Modern, fast, well played, disciplined. We're moving into the modern era of riffs, I think, with this album. I think it's a pretty important one. Next, I'm going with In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida, probably the only riff on this list that's not you don't really think of the guitar when you think of this riff, right? You're thinking that spooky, moody, depressing organ, right? And then little trapsy drums and stuff, and yeah, it's known for being the devil's note, the tritone, the Diablos in Musica, right? So we're getting that doom thing going on here again, and it's a super famous riff. Next, I'm going with Born to Be Wild. This is a I don't allow Steppenwolf into my collection, so we've got Riot and Arita and the Cult Electric here for Born to Be Wild. Yeah, super important riff, and as you so eloquently put, it's the start of heavy metal. It's one of the better heavy metal no nonsense guitar tones. As we're moving forward too. So if you want to hear a riff done the proper way with a modern heavy metal guitar tone style, you're definitely getting that there. And next, I also went with 21st Century Schizoid Man. Good long riff, another Black Dog, oh well kind of riff, Still of the Night riff, where it's long and complicated and just really cool. And as I said about the definition of the riff, it should be a hook, and this is totally the hook. This is exactly what you remember from this song. That's what goes through your head is that riff. And then I'm going with my top one. I'm going with Whole Lotta Love from this album. I feel like this is the first truly modern riff. In fact, I think it's a riff that almost skips the entire future history of heavy metal for the next 14 years. And that it basically presages Kill 'Em All Metallica. I think it's the first thrash riff. And, I say that meaning just that it's very disciplined in its palm muted stuff. And it's,
100%. Yep.
Yeah. And just the tightness with which it's played. And it has a lot of repetition as you get to the licks in it, right? Just doing that is basically the kernel of the idea of thrash, I think. So for that reason, yeah, I think it's the most modern riff. It's obviously from a late 1969 album, so it's the latest thing on here. But I think that's the start of modern day riffing right there.
And proof positive that you can have a classic riff that is not complicated at all, right? Sometimes simple is best, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. More on that later. All right. Number 5, I'm going to go with Summertime Blues from Vincibus Eruptum from Blue Cheer. It's just so molten and heavy and crushing. And yeah, they didn't write it, but they made it their own. Absolutely awesome. Number 4, I'm also going to echo Purple Haze off the First Experience album. It's absolute classic. It's totally psychedelic, but still pretty damn heavy for the time. Amazing. And yeah, he's got riffs all over that song, and that whole album is, this album and Zeppelin 1 and 2 and even Electric Ladyland are chock full of and Acts as Bold as Love. You could probably take all those albums alone and fill up most of this top 20. I mean, that's
Yeah.
the thing. It's just my top 25. Number three, I'm going to go with Bring It On Home by Zeppelin from Zeppelin 2. I mean, as you can see, we picked all sorts of songs from this album. There's plenty on here. This is like a feast of riffing right on this album. It's just so good. That's my number three. My number two, I'm going to go with Voodoo Child Slight Return from Jimi Hendrix from the third album, Electric Ladyland. Absolutely amazing. So heavy, great use of fuzz and feedback and wah wah and all that kind of stuff. You could even call that little lick in the beginning, the wah wah lick. That leads into the main riff, which is so good that just kind of fluctuates throughout the song. Amazing stuff. Hendrix, the master at coming up with these kind of unconventional riffs and whatnot. And yeah, number one is Whole Lotta Love. It's got to be. It's got to be. It's basic. It's primal. It's raw. The palm muting is great. Everything Martin says, absolutely true. So many guitar players who have done that sort of thing. That's where it comes from, right there.
Yeah.
Just absolutely classic. I figured and hoped that we both would have that as number one. And I think it just makes perfect sense that is the greatest guitar riff of the 60s. And you're right.
For those,
right at the tail end, right? Right at the tail end.
Exactly. Yeah. And for those who are interested, there's some neat YouTube videos about how guitarists tend to play it incorrectly, and there's a correct way and an incorrect way, and the incorrect way has a little bit more dissonance in it, and Jimmy does something a little tricky, and I can't remember how to describe it, but yeah, perfect there. So what have you got for honorable mentions?
All right, let's see. What do I got? Do you want me to just race through them?
Sure.
All right, I got Blood of the Sun by Leslie West, obviously. I got from Creedence, I got Keep on Chugling, Commotion, and Sinister Purpose. All are great. I have Spanish Castle Magic and Fire and Manic Depression from Jimi Hendrix. There's others. I didn't want to go berserk here. I kind of like Pinball Wizard by The Who a lot. That's off the Tommy album. That's a kind of a cool riff. It's a little different, but it's still pretty cool. Blue Cheer, I got a million of them because I also think that there's great riffs on the second album, but I've got Dr. Please, Out of Focus, Parchment Farm, Second Time Around, just a little bit, title track, so many great ones. I think those two albums are full of riffs. Grand Funk Railroad, I got In Need and Got This Thing on the Move. The James Gang, I also have I Don't Have the Time from the first album. From the Beatles, I have Taxman, She Said, Your Blues, and Helter Skelter. All great. From the Stones, I got Honky Tonk Woman, Satisfaction, Give Me Shelter. From Cream, I got Crossroads and Swallober, however the hell they say that. I still to this day, after listening to this album for 50 years, I still don't know how the hell you say that. And Jeff Beck Group, I've got I Ain't Superstitious, Spanish Boots, Plinth, Water Down the Drain, and Rice Pudding, and Free, I'm a Mover, and Steppenwolf, Magic Carpet Ride.
So, nice. Good
plus,
job.
plus also the MC5 and Iggy Pop and the Stooges.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I went through the Who. I couldn't find any Who that I was completely, I was boring the pants off me looking for Who riffs.
You Can't Explain is the classic one from there.
Yeah.
If you in the 70s, you have a few more because I think Who's Next has a few of them. But yeah, because Townsend plays unconditional riffs, right? They're a little different because there are these complex chord sequences and they're not like Can't Explain. I think that's a prototypical early riff, but some of his other stuff doesn't quite fall. I mean, even like Pinball Wizard, which is a riff but isn't, right? I mean, it's just I don't know. Yeah, Townsend's like in another league in his own, right? He doesn't kind of play in this sort of like riff game here.
A lot of single note licks and stuff as well.
Yeah, they're amazing, but it's just it's you don't like. I don't always think of him, even though like a lot of people like. It's the same thing I think with Keith Richards, right? These amazing rhythm guitar players, but like, are they really playing riffs, right? It's hard to say.
That's right. That's why they're called rhythm guitar players, right? So yeah. Okay, so I had a few here kicking around. What did I have? I had Blue Cheer, Second Time Around. I had Art, African Thing from Supernatural Fairy Tales.
Oh, good.
Jimi Hendrix, I Don't Live Today. I had Frost, Baby Once You Got It from Frost Music. Let's see, who are you through the that's 1970. High Tide, Sea Shanties. Let's see, Beatles, I Feel Fine. Yardbirds, Heart Full of Soul. Day Tripper, You Really Got Me. Roy Orbison, Oh Pretty Woman. Dick Dale, Misery Lou, or however you pronounce that. And that's pretty much it. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, we covered a lot of ground. There's a lot of good ones. And so I'm sure there's a lot more that folks will come up with down in the comments that we kind of forgot. But a really good decade for riffs, especially the last couple of years, right? Even though we do have some early mid 60s stuff, most of this is like the last couple of years.
You know, you could go through an exercise and probably find like the 10 or 12 obscure proto heavy metal albums from 1969 and find them all right there too.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't go that deep, but you're absolutely right because I think there's a lot of really cool kind of like those acid rock, garage rock, proto metal things that were coming out right at the end of the 60s. That I mean, I have a ton in my collection, right? Going through those and saying, "Oh yeah, that's a great riff. That's a great riff," and maybe deserves to be mentioned here. You know, but we covered. I think we covered all
Yep.
the classic ones. So
Yep. Absolutely.
now the hardest one is coming up next week.
I'm looking forward to it already, right? We're
Yeah, I
doing
know.
80s, right? Yeah.
So of course we're going to the 80s next, and this should be interesting because what'll be really cool to see, because when you look at the 80s, right, especially for heavier music, we've got like there's the new wave of British heavy metal, right? There's the early classic American metal scene. There's the hair and glam metal scene. There's thrash. There's early death metal, right? There's all this stuff. So I don't know, Martin. How many are we doing? Did we say?
I don't know. 180? I don't know. I don't know.
We might have
Let's
to do
see.
50. I don't know. Yeah, this is.
Want to
I
go to
guess
50? Yeah, we could.
I don't
Sure,
know.
let's
Well,
go
we'll
to
see how
50.
it goes because generally speaking, how this stuff works, folks, is like Martin and I will
Yeah.
kind of assemble our list through it. We tape on Friday, obviously. So over the weekend, if we have time, and then usually kind of Monday and Tuesday is when, for me anyway, when the real work starts. So that usually like by Wednesday or Thursday, one of us will send a Hail Mary to the other guy saying, Can we add 10 more? Can we do this?" As we kind of
Yeah.
fine tune our list. So yeah, there's a lot of good ones in the 80s. And obviously, we're going to be pretty heavy on the metal and hard rock side because there's just so many great ones. I'm just right now, I'm thinking there's so many are popping into my head. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh man, it's going to be
Yeah,
tough.
let's go 50. I'll tell you one thing about the 80s one already that I'm pretty sure of. I think most of my favorite riffs are from the 80s. They will
Overall,
essentially like I've more of like a emotional attachment to songs from the 70s, but I can already tell the ones that are going to come up at the top of my list when people just throw this question out to you. They're the first ones that come to mind, and they're all from the 80s. So it's going to be cool. So yeah, let's go 50. What the heck?
okay, sounds good. All right. So that's next week, folks. So tune in then. Visit us on the web. Oh, hey, before I do all that, Martin, give us some updates on your end on what's going on with books and podcasts and contribute.
Well, let's see. The last episode of History in Five Songs with Martin Popoff podcast was locating the Rolling Stones sound. And I'm gonna do another new wave of British heavy metal related one because of the big flame war that just happened on about that whole thing, who's in, who's out, kind of thing. And book wise, I just got in the updated version of my Iron Maiden album by album with the extra chapter, the Senjutsu chapter. I ran out of the first batch, but I ordered some more, and so those are coming within a week or so. So yeah, that's not really at my site. If anybody wants that, just messenger me or email me or whatever, and we'll sort it out. But yeah, all the books are there, and Contrarians, we did the album cover show, and that's it for now.
Cool. All right, we got the professor's picks coming up in just a couple hours this afternoon, so tune into that to see all what's new and hitting retail today on this Friday. Tomorrow we've got the UK Connection, where Simon, Stephen, and myself will be ranking the songs on a classic album. That album is Iron Maiden's Number of the Beast. So watch as we somehow try to rank those songs in our order of preference. Not an easy task. It's a very fun episode, so don't miss that. And then Sunday, Grant Arthur and I will be ranking the albums of JoJo Gunn, the very cool hard rock band formed from a couple guys from Spirit. So Jay Ferguson on lead vocals. So that's coming up on Sunday. So till then. Also Tuesday in the Prague seat, another album war. We got 5 classic progressive rock albums from Italy going to battle. We're going to rank them as we like them, so stay tuned for that as well. And visit us on the web at now I can do this. Visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube all together all the damn time. Please subscribe if you haven't already and click on that notification bell so you get alerted of all of our content as it posts. And please do hit the like button before you leave. Tune in next week for our favorite riffs of the 80s. Till then, for Martin Popoff and Pete Pardo, please pray for us while we try to put this list together because it's not going to be easy. Till then, we'll see you then. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.